Hello, Antoine. Just to warm up, perhaps we could start with you briefly sharing your story. You've been experienced AI since 25 years ago, almost, way before the recent hype came back into this industry. From your experience, what are the critical lessons that you've learned by building these AI companies?
Well, first of all, Anthony, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me. It's always fun to talk with you. Many lessons. One of them is we think of these AI systems as all-encompassing and somehow superhuman. They are not. And so one of the very important things that you need to really think hard about is you have to ask the right question of a machine learning system. I'll give you an example. When we were building our hedge fund, we were effectively trying to discover profitable strategies across a very large search space, right? So we asked the system, build me good, high-performing trading strategies. And sure enough, it built it. I mean, it took a while, right? Took a long time, but we got there. And so now we said, we've got these profitable strategies. We decide to deploy them, but we realized that they're good, but they don't deploy capital often, right? So they don't trade often.
They're conservative.
They're conservative. Well, yeah, exactly. They're conservative. So capital doesn't sweat. And when you run a hedge fund, you need capital to sweat because otherwise you deployed 10%, 15% of your capital. That's not enough. So you're going to earn a good return on 10% of your capital. How does that help you, right?
Well, it's not bad, 10% sometimes.
But what we should have asked the system is was not give me profitable traders or profitable trading strategies. What we should have asked the system is give me a profitable trading desk, right? Give me a profitable trading hedge fund. And so we learned how the hard way because it took us 2 years to build, and then we deploy, and then okay. So first, ask the right question, and for that you need to be a domain expert. You cannot try your luck at understanding what problem you're trying to solve. You have to know the problem inside out. Number two, try not to boil the ocean. Again, we think of the systems as very powerful, and they are, but then they will default to finding solutions and giving the answers that suit them, okay, as they don't necessarily suit you. And so by decomposing the problem in stages where you can control and really understand what the machine does well, by decomposing the suite of problems that you're trying to do, then you do a much better job at eventually delivering performance. And so once you've done that and you've got a super performing system, whatever the application, yeah, you can try and try to boil the ocean if you want. But there is real value in being narrow and focused and delivering value one by one. And it's very important now because, we're going to talk about, I'm sure we're going to talk about agents and workflows. Trying to build an end-to-end workflow, it's hard. It's not friction free. It's friction full. So if you decompose this and build multi-agents, for example, you will do a lot better. So
laser focus and then solving the problem that you understand very deeply.
Yes.
So when you look at today's evolving startups, basically every day someone announced new funding. Where do you see what are the most common mistakes, or where do you see what not going to fly for sure?
So the most common mistakes that folks make is think that if they can solve a problem with AI, then they have a business. But in many cases, not the case. It's not because you can solve a problem with AI that this problem is important, that people will pay for it, that people will pay enough for it, and there's a large market for it.
So there's a business side of things.
Yes.
Beyond the technical side of things.
It's, so, just like back 25 years ago with the internet revolution, a lot of people built companies, But what they were effectively building is widgets and features. They were not building products. You need to build a product that's going to address real problem that people are going to pay for and for which there's a big market. And so we see this all the time. We see people that are building fun and interesting applications using AI, but nobody's going to pay for it.
Interesting. And where do you see the most promising areas for startups to tackle?
So there are many. We can think about functions, enterprise productivity, paralegal work or accounting work. I'll give you an example in a second. Can be really addressed by machines. You can also think about verticals, where in healthcare, for example, where there's massive opportunities. Let me just maybe go over a couple of these. In the enterprise productivity space, I'm an investor in a company called Cinch in San Francisco. They do accounting. Now, you're going to say accounting is not the sexiest business. First of all, we have to trust our accountant, and we don't change accountants very often. Why? Because he knows our history, right? And there's a trusted relationship. There's a lot of stuff you give your accountant, whether it's your corporate accountant, whether it's your personal accountant. So accounting is a sticky relationship. That's the first premise. Second premise, you can use a lot of AI today to automate a good chunk of repeatable work in an accounting workflow. For example, tax filing. Now, tax filing in Hong Kong is simple, so you may not need that. But tax filing in the US is complex, so you do need that. If you do this, you can increase your EBITDA by, say, a factor of 4x.
Oh.
So as a CPA, as an accountant, your margins average of 15% today.
By just reducing the cost or making it more efficient, or
by reducing the amount of human hours that have to go to effectively delivering a tax filing.
I recalled a conversation that I had with the dean of one of the universities in Hong Kong, and we were in the elevator, and there was the button says accounting department, and I was joking back then. It was 5 years ago. Like, maybe you should, rename it into AI department, because we will not see accountants in foreseeable future.
Yeah,
pretty much.
I think that's generally right. I think we'll probably still need, in the short term,
like junior ones.
Yeah. You'll need the senior accountant to sign off, but the junior accountants are going to go away, and so you increase your margins by a factor of 4x. It's a fact that really thought the go-to-market through really nicely, because it's really hard to sell to accounting firms, just like it's very hard to sell to lawyers, right? Those are not early adopters of technology solutions. So how are you going to go to market? So these guys, what they decided to do is to buy the books of accounting firms.
Essentially clients.
Yeah, they buy clients. I didn't know this, but in the US, there's a market for CPAs that are for sale, accounting firms that are for sale. And there's a lot of firms for sale at any given time, and it makes sense because folks are in their 60s and 70s, they want to retire. Young generation is not too excited by taking over, so they sell. The economics of this are very compelling.
I think for this, even you don't really require very sophisticated AI.
Actually, it's more complex than you think.
Okay.
Otherwise, everybody would be doing it. There's two aspects to this. There is the model themselves, and there is the workflow enablement. And the workflow enablement, you have to really think about how you're going to insert yourself into the accounting workflow. You cannot really completely take over, right? You have to be the smart co-pilot that takes over when needed, and it hands it over or hands it back to the human when needed, right? And that's not simple.
When you were telling me about the accounting, I suddenly thought of all these, typical Hong Kong families who would persuade their kids to choose the accounting because it's a safe profession. No matter it's economy going up and down, accountants are always in need. But I guess you would give a different advice to them.
Yeah, I think right now it's better to be a carpenter than to be an accountant. So Yeah.
Indeed. But if you are now to start an AI company, what would you do? Which company would you start?
That's a tough question. It's tough questions because the opportunities are just so many. I think I would try to do something fun.
Like an entertainment?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I've been looking at sponsoring a project that would be entertainment space and movie space. And it's not about, in this case, it's not about deep AI or even AI. It's really about how do you integrate different types of tools so that instead of having as a director, as a talent in the space, instead of having to really work hard to find the best of breed in every single domain, whether it's scenario writing and then character description and then shooting and editing and everything else in between. Instead of having to do that as a director, can you get access to a suite of tools that is packaged that can help you deliver that much more seamlessly? So
essentially an operator of the tools.
Yes, exactly.
Rather than the main expert in each of this niche.
Correct.
And you see this opportunity in that space, building software that helps to coordinate these processes and tools.
Yeah, think about it. Runway ML.
Yeah, like Kling AI, Sora.
Yeah, so all these guys, right? So thousands and thousands of short form movies that have been made off of these tools, right? Can you name any of them? You can't, right? Why? Because this is not world-class content yet, right? It is still, it's still, it's kind of cool, but it's just kind of cool. But that's it.
I remember Coca-Cola.
Right. So Coca-Cola was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But if you want to build like world-class, Hollywood grade, feature-length movie, what are you going to do? How are you going to help the director shoot and deliver that movie? That's the opportunity, and I think it's quite interesting.
Is that just because people who are experimenting with these tools are not necessarily within the industry?
Those are two totally different worlds. Yeah, there is a challenge, right, in trying to marry the human creativity with machine-based augmentation of that creativity. This is a big challenge. And it is solved in certain industries. I'll give you an example in a second. But in the movie industry, it's going to be hard. But I think there's a big opportunity. Let me give you an example of how it is solved. We invest, and I mentioned healthcare before. We invested in AI Doc, which is a Israeli-based firm that does AI-enabled radiology, so CT scans, MRIs. And you'd think, okay, this is all about detecting patterns on an image or a series of images, but it is also working with the doctor, the radiologist, to help him or her prioritize the right image and help him or her specify what next image or what next series of image should I take in order to validate my diagnostic. It's about making sure that the most critical cases are bubbling up in your list and of cases to treat. It's making your job a lot easier. It still gives you complete command and control of your workflow as a human, but you're augmented. And because of this, there's tremendous adoption because just doctors are much more productive.
Essentially a co-pilot, what we call it.
Yeah.
Back to the movies, where do you expect there will be an AI fully produced movie in a foreseeable future hit the cinemas?
Yeah, I think in the next couple of years.
And if someone in this business at the moment, what would you recommend them to focus on? I mean, in the traditional filming industry.
Well, I would tell them, don't be afraid of it. Embrace it, because it's now. It's not in 10 years' time. And I would go and try to work with people within the AI ecosystem to understand what is it that they do and how I can influence their work to help me deliver best outcomes. So I think it's a huge opportunity today. I mean, if you've seen what happened between Hollywood and the Silicon Valley, you'd think, wow, what a waste. it should be better, and it will be better.
Do you expect there will be a YouTube moment in the filming industry where a one-man band studio produces Hollywood great movies and become essentially a very successful business?
Yes, I think that will happen. It's not for today, because as I said, it's still friction-full. So, and you still need a lot of human input into this. But I think in 3 to 4 years, it's eminently possible that these workflows can be then packaged into creator-focused tools, right? And actually I've seen people trying to put creator-focused tools. One of my companies, Hicksfield, in the US, has done that. It's called Real Magic. It's pretty good. It's not going to get you Hollywood-grade movies, but it's going to get you pretty good stuff for short form advertising, and that's already very good. To deliver, Saving Private Ryan with AI is going to be a while.
Yeah, because essentially it will democratize the access to all this, a very expensive production that could be done now in a fraction of cost.
With AI as the creativity augmentation tool, the sky's the limit.
And actually, while you were describing this, I was thinking about another technology that is kind of put aside now, which is virtual reality. The metaverse hype is over. However, if you think about the natural AI applications, when you could interact with avatars in a very natural human sort of way, and building the 3D environments that could be built in a matter of seconds or even in real time, do you think that this industry would get a new sort of wave of development?
There's even more to this, right? So we just talked about the movie industry. The movie industry, the gaming industry, and generally, virtual environments are going to converge, right? So today, you're a spectator when you go to see a movie or when you consume a movie on your couch. I think going forward, you'll be an interactive player in that movie, right? You'll begin to interact with it. You'll influence the outcome.
You can be a part of the...
You can be a part of it, right? And so movies are going to become more like games, games that are going to become more movie grade in terms of the quality and experience. And some of it will eventually happen in a full 3D environment, which is what you just talked about. And so those worlds will converge. To what, I'm not sure. And I think eventually AI can even give us more novel ways to consume entertainment.
This could be also education. World-class education for people everywhere.
Education is one of the most interesting opportunities for AI enablement. We all remember that special teacher that we had in our childhood, whom we loved because of their interaction style, because they trusted us.
Passion.
Whatever it was, right?
Yes. Charisma.
Yeah. And they really understood us, so we really like that particular person. AI can do this for you, right? AI can be your trusted tutor that can really help you explore the world and, make you grow and learn in a process in a way that are unique.
Basically, personalization will help to create this environment for kids with different abilities and different ways of pursuing information and learn, rather than the existing school system, which is pretty much average standard.
Correct. I think this is a huge opportunity for personalized education, not just education, on the job training. First of all, education is not going to stop at age, 18, 25 or whatever. Education is going to carry on. You're going to have to, going forward, learn on the job, just simply because, jobs are going to change so quickly. But AI will be able to help you retrain yourself, quite seamlessly, I think. At the end of the day, we all like to learn. Hopefully, we all like to learn, but we don't learn the same way. The idea is, can AI help me learn my way?
It's a little bit different, but I'm experimenting with a couple of apps where you can do journaling as more like wellness. But the beauty of that, the app keeps the history of your conversation. and then connecting the dots in whatever it could be, your dreams, your thoughts, your worries, your excitements, and it's pretty interesting and scary at the same time.
Yeah, so the scariness aspect of it is the trust issue. Can you trust this? And I'll always use the example of the first time I got into a Waymo car. Have you been into a Waymo car? Okay, so you have to do it.
What's that? Sorry.
Waymo is a self-driving car in San Francisco, Phoenix, and LA, right? You've been into one?
Yeah, but I've never been in the car. Yeah.
Okay. I've been in AI for a long time. So the first time I got into a Waymo, I think was 3 to 4 years ago. I was very self-aware. I looked at myself, getting into that car. I kid you not, 90 seconds maybe, I surprised myself being on the phone and forgetting completely that there was no driver. And it was rainy in San Francisco at night, so I picked the right day. But the reason why I was on my phone within 90 seconds is because I just realized so quickly, that, hey, this car is actually driving like a human drives. There's no difference. No difference. In fact, at night and in the rain, I felt it was actually driving pretty quickly. But of course, it drives probably quicker than me in this particular setting, just because it does see a lot better. It has a LiDAR on top of having cameras, so it's pretty good. But long story short, I got very comfortable very quickly. So I developed trust in it so quickly. Perhaps it was me who's just biased, So to be sure, I asked my wife and my daughter when they were in town to get into the car with me, or a car with me. And same thing, within a couple of minutes, they were talking to each other. And to me, just like nothing happened. And so, it's all about building trust. Once we have trust in the machines, then we'll coexist with these machines like we coexist with humans.
I guess scary is not as much of the distrust to the machines, but more of the fear of other cars that, driven by the humans, may do something unpredicted.
Yeah, that's a good point. We give humans weapons every day, and they're called cars, right? But somehow we've developed frameworks that enable us to trust the human brain to deal with these weapons properly, right? It's called, and this is to the
laws and rules and
exactly. There's driving license. There's enforcement of that, and lo and behold, on average, we do actually trust the driver. And I think for machines, that amount of trust can be even higher because we can conceive of guardrails and tests that are much, much more stringent. And so eventually it's a foregone conclusion that we will all be driven by machines because they'll do a better job.
It reminds me of the sort of a parallel when back in the days you had in each elevator you had a human who would push the buttons, close the doors, open the doors, and then essentially it was replaced by just you go inside the elevator, you push the button, and you fully trust the elevator will take you to where you want. So that's, I guess, what's gonna happen with the cars, autonomous vehicles, and so on.
And so, of course, the consequences of this are massive, right? So, as a society, we need to think a bit about what that means. Do we really need people to drive cars, or can we use these brains to do things that are higher value adding? It's the same thing as people assemble products in factories. The only reason why they are there is just simply because the hand-eye coordination system of the brain, the human brain, is so good that today it's still hard for robots to get things done at the same level. But once that's done, do we really want people to continue to assemble things, or are they better off doing something else with their brains, which can really do much greater things?
Do you feel like this could be a better sort of, if we use this analogy as AI would automate or execute this stuff that is sort of boring and simple, and leave people with a lot much more time to actually pursue much more sophisticated things?
So I hope so. I hope that this is where we can go and so unleash that creativity among humans, the real glass half full view of the world. But I think there's just a great opportunity of doing this. At the same time, the glass half empty is, well, oh, okay. So, but that transition is going to be challenging. And so, look, I'm a big believer in progress, and I think that technology has done extremely good things for humanity as a whole. At the same time, this transformation is going to be faster and more brutal than anything we've ever experienced. And being able to be agile, to not fear the new, embrace change, that's going to be the determining factor between societies that win and societies that lose. But not all societies do that. And so I think there's a lot of work to do there.
Organizations, governments that are now looking at what they can do with AI, where do you see what they're getting actually wrong when it comes to AI applications?
So the first thing that companies don't do is they don't try enough. And the reason why they don't try enough is because they don't realize that there's actually quite a bit of low-hanging fruits that they can achieve very quickly. Today, if you put together a small team, just a few folks, right? One product head, a couple of machine learning engineers, a couple of data scientists. If you put that team together, within a few weeks, you are addressing a specific problem, whatever that is, you'll get to first base in terms of outcome. You'll get to something that
How to choose the problem?
Yeah, we have to choose a problem, but you have to choose it. And my recommendation there is always look at your secret sauce. What defines you as a company? What is your USP? Within that secret sauce, identify what you believe is likely to be augmented, transformed, or disrupted by AI. Work with your team towards transforming, augmenting, or disrupting this, right? Because if you don't do it yourself, then someone else will do it, right? Yeah. So better cannibalize yourself than get cannibalized. That's what I always recommend. The other thing that I do not advise is don't outsource your intelligence, right? Your USP has to stay yours. You cannot outsource it to Oracle or Microsoft or Accenture. Otherwise, you're effectively outsourcing your core value proposition. So that's really quite critical. And so that's what I recommend. Now, if you're afraid to start with your USP, your core value, just start at the fringe. Start with, I don't know, customer support, for example, and see where you can go with that. And I've seen extraordinary outcomes when companies have started to really focus even on things like customer support, reduction in treatment of tickets by a factor of 2x, 3x within a few months. So the time to resolution, size of teams come down. You do a better job of servicing your customers, and you do it with less people.
By deploying the AI in a work environment, will you be looking at existing AI solution and then work on integration? Will you develop things in-house or a combination of both?
So it's case by case. But again, my advice is if you're going to look for external solutions, you have to remain in control of your value, right? So your value might be in the data. Your value might be in the logic, so your workflow, for example. If that's the case, then it has to stay yours. So that you have to be very careful about this. And so that then dictates whether you build in-house or you outsource.
And why you need to be careful about this?
Because if you lose your value, you lose your company.
Which are the key areas that you're now focusing on in terms of investment, where you see the most potential at the moment?
So we look at the world of AI in different ways. We have different mental models. For example, we look at infrastructure and we look at applications. we look at verticals like healthcare, enterprise productivity, video gaming, security, and so on and so forth. I'll give you maybe a couple of pointers. We do a lot in infrastructure. It's the amount of work you have to do in terms of understanding the stack is really important. We invested in OpenAI. We invested maybe about 2.5 years ago in a firm. This is a big bet we made in the model space. I mentioned a company before that does model development and workflow development for movie making. This is also quite involved in technologically. So we do things like this. Point being, in the infrastructure space, there's a lot of opportunities. Let me give you another example. The human brain does not really unlearn things, right? I mean, we get old, we can unlearn. We have an accident, we can unlearn, unfortunately. But for machines, there's no reason why they could not unlearn, right? It's software. We invested in this firm in Israel that does machine unlearning. So what does that mean? It means that, you've learned this concept, like you can recognize that BMW, for example, in an image. Well, for some reason, this may not be proper. So the regulator may tell you you're not compliant, that data you shouldn't have. That data may be private, right? Or that data may be wrong, right? So for these reasons, you want to unlearn. And so now you recognize that car, tomorrow you cannot recognize it anymore. In my view, every single model going forward will have to have that ability to unlearn. But it's very hard to do because today the only way you unlearn is by retraining models. So how can you unlearn without having to retrain the entire model? That is what that company does.
It's like a black and man when you wipe off the memory of the AI.
Exactly, that's what it is.
Is there any areas where you will not touch within AI industry?
We don't do anything that has to do with
Obvious.
gambling.
Yeah.
The obvious things. Historically, we were quite bullish on investing in manufacturing, logistics, and in fact, we're seeing the beginning of the recovery in that space. But it's been a long and hard time coming. Sales cycle and deployment cycle in these industries have been really, really long. So when we look at logistics and manufacturing nowadays, we're really very thoughtful. But otherwise, we're pretty agnostic. We like a lot of different spaces. We like healthcare. We've done a lot of investments in healthcare. I mentioned AI Doc. We've done the same with in a company called Procia, which does AI-enabled pathology, so biopsy slides. One thing that will be, which I'm sure will be of interest to folks, is an investment we made, I'd say 4 or 5 years ago, in a company called InstaDeep. They were based in London. They were developing deep AI for a range of different use cases, but one of them was developing or addressing large molecules for drug discovery. Now, large molecules is a space for which the industry has not, is a space that has not been the core focus of the industry. But large molecules are things like viruses. So traditionally, the industry is focused on small molecules, typically cancer. But that company developed a tool to help address large molecules, i.e. viruses. And so they were critical in helping BioNTech, the company in Germany, develop the COVID vaccine so quickly. And one of the things that was really, really cool, sort of halfway through the pandemic, they developed that advanced warning system that would tell you that based on the gene pool of the virus in this particular territory, this is the likelihood of mutations occurring over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 months, 6 months, with this kind of toxicity, transmittability, and so on and so forth. So they were telling you as a government that you should pay attention to this and this and that. And of course, they would be telling Big Pharma, BioNTech, to develop the vaccine to address these particular variants. They would give the typology and characteristics of a variant, and they would name a variant weeks before the WHO would say, "Hey, we've got this new variant of the virus. Pay attention to it." Weeks before, months before, sometimes.
Which is scary if it's misused.
Well, obviously, you don't want this to fall in the wrong hands, but this is not about building viruses. It's about predicting the evolution of the virus in the wild, right? So it's not exactly the same.
And from your observation, what are the most overvalued companies at the moment? I mean, obviously now everyone is looking to invest in the AI.
Yeah.
You see a lot of funds coming in. There's a lot of appetite, a lot of money flows.
The valuation discussion is a difficult one. I'll tell you why. It's hard to make blanket statements about this. There are companies like OpenAI, for example, who are truly building a business. Last year, the figures are public. They did roughly $3.5 billion of revenue. This is a company that was doing less than $20 million 4 years ago. And they're building a business. And so are they worth, $260 billion pre-money as Mr. Sar is going to claim they are? It's a good question. I'm an investor in them, so I'm happy. But if you think about who can come out and truly be a blockbuster IPO in due course by building a true business across many product lines, OpenAI is one such opportunity. I think where you see valuations being distorted is when you see sort of an OpenAI being there and then the followers being there minus alpha, just because they are followers and the comps are made just based on maybe some revenue metrics or just technology metrics. But if you're not building a business, you won't be valuable. And so I think Mistral, the French company, I'm French, so I'm very happy that Mistral exists, but are they worth the amount of money that the last round made them to be? I think in order for them to be worth this, they have to build a business. They have fantastic technology, a fantastic team. The onus now upon them is to build a business, and they can then graduate into their valuation. And then you have a lot of startups, a seed round, Series A, Series B, that get valued tremendous amounts of money before even building a business. And sometimes I find it to be a bit ridiculous. So as an investor, it matters. If you invest at 50 million or 200 million, it's not the same as if you invest in at 10 or 15. Your multiple goes down dramatically. So my advice always to entrepreneurs is make sure you price your company right, because at the end of the day, you will need money down the road. If you price yourself too high at the beginning, it's very hard to raise money downstream.
And we've seen this in a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. Now that Nvidia valuation comes back after DeepSeek moment, do you see the room for further growth? What's your take on Nvidia in the long term?
Yes. So I'm a big believer in Nvidia. Let me tell you why. There's a transfer, and it's a secular trend. It's going to last for decades. A transfer of biological brain cycles, our brain cycles, to machine brain cycles, right? And today it's very small, right? So a few accountants here and there, a few paralegals here and there. So that transfer is very small. But as AI takes over and more functions, that transfer goes up. There's so much brain power in our brains that if you begin to transfer a bit more, the amount of compute that's required in the cloud is going to skyrocket. I did some rough computations the other day, and I depending on the metrics you use for GPU configuration and also how accurate, which is difficult to do, the measures for our own brain computation power are, depending on this, one can say that one human brain is equal to between 5 and 1,500 H100 GPUs, right, from Nvidia. Between 5 and 1,500. One human brain. So let's just assume 5, okay, to be conservative. We have 8 billion people. So times 5, it's like 40 billion H100 GPUs. Like even if you take half of the people, like 4 billion, let's say the working age people, 4 billion, and you say, okay, I'm going to just use 1% of the brain power of 4 billion, that's 40 million. 1%, 40 million, and then multiply by 5, it's still 200 million H100 GPUs, just for 1% of the human brain power of the working age people. That's, so we're nowhere near these numbers, right? Nvidia is just selling, a few hundred thousands. So number one. Number two, machines do a lot of things that humans don't do. Let me give you an example. We have a company in the US that's called Zero Eyes that does weapons detection in real time. So they have tens of thousands of video feeds of cameras all around the country to spot whether somebody is walking in a parking lot with a machine gun. Then they can automatically alert law enforcement so that that person is either apprehended before, or at least before there's a 911 call and all pandemonium erupts, right? So the idea is, can you shrink the time it takes for law enforcement to intervene? Point being, you could not have 10,000, 100,000, 1 million people just watching video feeds, right? Doesn't work. But you can have machines do that. And so machines do a lot of things that we humans cannot do. Another example, machines do a lot of 3D protein folding work to match drug candidates to cancer or virus targets in highly complex 3D computational protocols. We can't do this as humans. Machines can do this at scale. So there's a lot of things that machines do that we cannot do. So not only are they going to take over portions of our brain, but they are going to do things they are doing things that we never thought we would be doing as humans. The combination of these two things means that it's a foregone conclusion that compute demand is going to scale dramatically. The other reason why I'm a big believer in Nvidia is because you need a holistic compute architecture to compute AI. Why is that? In the crypto space, we compute Bitcoin the same way now, or we mine them the same way we mined them 10 years ago. But the way we compute AI now is different than the way we computed it 2 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. And as models continue to evolve, and as you said, breakthrough happen almost every day nowadays, the way we compute models is going to change dramatically. Today we do a lot of LLMs. We're going to add images. We're adding images. We're adding video, multimodal, we're going to do spatial intelligence, physics, time series of spatial models. There's going to be a huge requirement for compute, and that compute is going to shift. And because it's going to shift in nature, it needs an architecture that's adaptable enough to handle it. And NVIDIA has this. And that's why I'm a believer in their continued dominance. They won't be the only one, but they'll continue to do well.
What about the sort of so-called challengers? Companies like Cerebras, Grok. Do you see there's room for those companies going forward?
So the history of specialized AI chips is littered with failures. But I think we will see the emergence of 1, 2, maybe 3 firms that will compete. I don't think they'll be as successful as Nvidia, but some of them will do well. I don't know if it's Grok or Cerebras or Halo or anyone else, but some of them will do well. As long as they can develop an architecture that can scale and adapt to the next models, which is not obvious. None of these today are really doing that yet. For example, Grok is mostly an inference play. It's very smart that Jonathan Ross at Grok decided to productize or decide to go to market as a service. I think it was very smart. So you're not buying chips from him, you're buying compute. I think it's smart.
Tokens, yeah.
Yeah, and so, but we'll see who wins. It's a tough space.
Since you mentioned crypto, you are sitting on the board of one of the largest crypto companies in the world, Crypto.com.
Yes.
Crypto exchange.
Yes.
Do you see a clear path of where AI can leverage on blockchain and outside of the crypto native space?
Yeah, I think there's two big opportunities, one around agents and one around data. On agents, so AI agents are effectively capturing tasks, functional tasks. For example, let's do a KYC, right? Or let's do an NDA contract. That's a task, right? Today, those agents are sold either as a subscription model or as an API model, so volume based. But it's not doing justice to these agents. Why? Because as you begin to understand and to decompose complex processes in 1, 2, 3 simple, specific processes, then you understand the cost of these and you understand the value of these. The best way to capture value is by way of blockchainizing those agents. So I'm a big believer in the agentic AI being blockchainized over time. That's, I think, the way that we're going to crack the issue of business model for agents. Here's the issue. We are, as humans, we are not paid most of the time
by tasks
based on the value of what we deliver, right? We're paid by the months or by the day if you're a consultant or by the hour for your lawyer, regardless of what you actually did, right? Essentially. Ideally, you should be paid by the deliverable, right? As a function of the value of the deliverable. And I think blockchainized agents will enable this. It's going to be an uphill battle to get there, but eventually I think we'll get there. That's number one. Number two, data. If you're the Washington Post and if you're OpenAI, you can do a deal, right, between the two because you have lawyers on both sides. If OpenAI wants to have access to your data, you're the Washington Post, you can work out an agreement because, again, you can pay for your lawyers. But if you're a small newspaper in Pittsburgh or wherever, right, or if you're an art gallery in New York and you're a small art gallery, but you have some great artists and you want to be licensing your data to OpenAI, how do you do it? You're not going to pay for high-flying lawyers to negotiate. So you need a framework. And so data sourcing, data governance, and data attribution and monetization, all of that, I think eventually is going to be marketplace-based. The best way to create a friction-free marketplace for large-scale data contracting is going to be blockchain.
But do you see that happens in the foreseeable future? Would it require the rest of the industry to adopt the blockchain, or it's just as a backend sort of technology that would enabler, but for end users it won't make any difference?
Yeah, it's a good question because today these worlds are very, very distinct, right? The AI world is not talking to the blockchain world, and blockchain world is beginning to talk to the AI world. I mean, there's been quite a few startups that have started to do things in the space. It's still early. Maybe we'll see interesting things around blockchain applied or tokenization of compute. That will be interesting. That could be a first way to begin to look at. If you think of compute is just another task, right? Maybe it's going to start from there, where there's a real strong demand from AI and then the AI industry, and then today it's switching from farm A to farm B. Again, it's not friction-free. Can you make it friction-free by blockchainizing it? I think that's an opportunity.
What about the data authenticity or authentication, or one of the very often used example of potential application of both blockchain and within the AI industry is to authenticate the data, or basically understand whether this is human generated or AI generated.
I mentioned data before, and I mentioned it in a data provenance and attribution. context, and I think that's very relevant. You're right. There's also the watermarking of data, whether data is human created or synthetic. I think that's another use case. Generally, I think data provenance, attribution, monetization, and governance can be run by blockchain better than it can at scale, better than it can be by humans.
What is required to make it happen?
Smart entrepreneurs who can bridge those two worlds. I'm starting to see projects in the space. I'm just beginning to see people who are starting to straddle the blockchain world and the AI world. Maybe it's, you just need a few smart folks who decide to do it, understand both worlds, and are competent and not focused on making just one quick buck, but on building a real business.
Is it on the agenda of the board meetings at the crypto.com?
So AI is on the agenda for sure, big time, because I have to say, it's just that as a company, crypto.com has embraced AI unlike many others. They have really, really been very focused on it. And the company has really solid development resources, and they haven't shied away from using that to eat their own dog food, develop their own AI-enabled services that they consume internally, but also start to make available externally on the app. But for pretty much everything, customer support, KYC, ML, internal workflows. So that's the kind of behavior that I'd like to see among large corporates. I'd like to see companies that are just really going for it, just like Crypto.com is doing it.
Was the new administration taking sort of more pro-crypto approach in the US and with their sort of focus on AI, do you see that would give a massive impulse in blockchain development going forward? So
definitely the center of the crypto world has shifted towards the US last few months. Having an administration that finally gets its act together when it comes to proper crypto regulation is going to really help. It was never rocket science. Many countries have done it well. The US is finally going to do it well, and because of the scale of the market and the capabilities of the players there, I think that market is going to do very well over the next few years. And Crypto.com is a big participant in there, and so we're going to be continuing to focus on that market meaningfully over the next few years. As to your question about whether this will facilitate crypto and AI interaction, for sure it will, because the US has been a center of AI development for years. The fact that we're going to see more crypto innovation being fostered through the change of administration and just renewed energy and bullishness in the ecosystem in the US is going to help. So I think you'll see those bridges form and more innovation happen out of the US in crypto specifically and crypto plus AI.
Elon Musk influencing the US tech policy, is it good or bad for the industry?
I think it's a net positive. There's probably no better entrepreneur today than Elon Musk. Being able to foster an environment where innovation is cherished, I think is important. And he is an innovator, right? Is a remarkable innovator. And I don't think he's going to go to Washington to regulate innovation or protect his own companies. I think his agenda is very much to try and help the US continue to win, because he's a beneficiary of this. As an immigrant in the US, he's done very well. He has seen how the system can propel folks to maximize their potential. And I think that's his agenda. Given this, I think it's a net positive. After this, the mixing of business and politics, always complicated, has to be managed. US is a country of checks and balances. And so we'll see what happens. But it's worked okay in the past, for sure. Let's make sure we'll have to make sure it works well in the future.
If we put aside the fact that you're invested in OpenAI, would you agree with Elon Musk thesis that OpenAI should transform back into the original state of nonprofit?
So it's a different company. So my answer to that is no, right? I think for OpenAI to thrive and really achieve its potential, it has to turn into a for-profit. It is a different company. And we have to acknowledge this. The company was started as a not-for-profit, essentially not-for-profit, to really democratize access to AI. But it found itself in a leadership position almost by accident in 22. I say almost by accident because like many others, this is a company that essentially threw darts at the wall and then won stock. And it was a revelation. It was not a plan. As a result, they found themselves in this extraordinarily interesting position where they're market leading, they're technology leading, and market leading at the same time. What do? Do you say, okay, I'm still not for profit. I'm not going to leverage my advantage. I'm going to let everybody else catch up, and that's it? Or do you say, I'm going to go for it? And I respect the decision they made. They could have gone the other way. But once you make the decision to go for it, then you go for it. And that's what they've done. And I think as a result, they have to transform into a full for-profit company.
In regards to the approach of being sort of a closed system and open source system, we've seen that DeepSeek sort of disrupted or created a bit of a disruption in that space. In the mid to long term, where do you see which model would win?
The world needs open source because open source drives the speed of innovation and puts everyone on their toes. And so I really think that folks like Llama, so Meta, Llama, Mistral, DeepSeek are doing a great favor for the industry. At the same time, if you're building a business and your business depends on the quality of the performance of your code, you will keep at least some of that code to yourself. And so closed source also makes sense depending on what you're trying to build. In the case of Meta, their business is, for example, not search. It's not a Copilot. Their business is effectively driving users to spend more time and consume better advertising or more monetizable advertising on their social properties. Right? So they have a built-in application suite that makes them monetize their AI, whether it's closed or open. Okay, that's how they monetize. In the case of OpenAI, it's not the same. OpenAI has to come up with its own applications and compete with the likes of Google. If you do search, for example, the algorithmic model that you use for search is the most important value proposition or the value driver of your search outcome. If you open source this, your whole business goes away, right? So you cannot do that. And so Google would never open source their search algorithms. By the same token, it's not possible for OpenAI to open source their search GPT algorithm, which is both an index and a LLM, and the combination thereof. So if you look at it from an OpenAI standpoint, it makes sense to stay closed source for a number of their applications. They may decide to go open source for certain aspects of them, but definitely for a number of apps, they have to stay closed source.
What's your take on the future of development of AI in China, and comparing this to the US? What do you see the major differences and major similarities?
So China has a major ecosystem in AI. It has a lot of talent, not just quantity but also quality. And it's ironic we're talking about artificial intelligence, but it's all about human talent, right? So China has that pool of talent that is large, and given this, China is going to do well in AI. There's no question in my head. Plus, there's a market, right? China has a large domestic market, whether it's in consumer or retail, or logistics, manufacturing, banking, finance. There's just a lot of applications that are rife for AI enablement in China, and also given the fact that labor costs in China have gone up, and there's a drive for efficiency now. I think there will also be opportunities in anything that has to do with enterprise productivity. Big opportunities in China. I think they will be generally constrained to the Chinese domestic market, but it's a big market.
Why? Do you think China will not be able to compete on a global level?
No, it's just simply because it's hard in this fractured world. It's hard today for Chinese companies to certainly to sell into the West.
Is that because of the sort of like restrictions that will be imposed?
Restrictions and perceptions, both. So, things may be different in a few years' time if things start to improve between China and the US. But right now, it's just a hard
about
thing.
the so-called global South, who is referring, the Middle East, the other countries.
So there may be a few opportunities there, but look, today where do these companies make money? They make money in large developed markets. If I was a Chinese firm today, I would just focus on knocking it out of the park in China. So what are the differences? It's a good question, because I don't think that actually that many differences. We saw DeepSeek, and they're open source, but you have open source players in the US. You've got closed source players as well in China. The big tech players in China have their very own prop AI development initiatives internally, and that's critical. And they've worked on this for a long time. Same thing in the US. So I don't see those markets are being so different. There's some pockets of competencies that Chinese companies have been very good at for a long time. Anything that has to do with images based on the early work of companies like SenseTime, Hikvision, and others. So China was an early leader in that for sure, and I think it retains a lot of expertise. Also, anything that has to do with B2C, so recommendation engines, obviously TikTok. So recommendation engines, e-commerce, and marketing, very, very strong, and also gaming. And I think where China has to catch up is probably in the enterprise space. And and then you get to see the opposite in the US, where there've been a lot of large US corporates and early adopters of technology, and you see a lot of stuff that has been done for a long time in enterprise productivity.
Do you believe that not just China, but other countries will be able to develop a competitive companies? If you draw the analogy with countries like, Russia, Turkey, who has their own search engine domination.
Yeah.
Do you see that would happen within the AI industry going forward? Or we'll have this fragmentation, or that will be just a couple of US primarily dominant players that will dominate the global market?
I think it's hard to see the future, to be honest. This is an industry that's moving so quickly that it's really hard to see 2-3 years out, let alone 5 or 10. The most vibrant ecosystems, right? So I'm not only talking about large established corporates, but also talking about the vibrancy and dynamism of the startup ecosystem. Because it's moving very quickly, and breakthroughs can happen everywhere. If you have critical mass of talent, critical mass of compute, people who tinker and try their luck and try again, eventually you get something, and it creates value. And where do you have that critical mass? A, US, B, China. And then you have standards of excellence, Tel Aviv, In Europe, you've got London, you've got Paris, Zurich, and then you've got other places where it's starting to emerge. Singapore, maybe UAE. But the scale matters, right? The scale of people, the number of people who are trying their luck, that matters. So I think going forward, you'll see those ecosystems in the US first and China second. I think they will remain dominant. Doesn't mean you won't see a great company emerging out of South Africa or the UAE or wherever else, but it's going to be the exception, not the rule.
So essentially, many countries will face a choice whether they will have to adopt the US-driven sort of technology or China tech, or whether they will be able to balance between the two. Like we are now in Dubai. Do you see that Dubai will be able to become sort of like AI Switzerland in that sense?
I think it's hard to be the AI Switzerland nowadays. I think you have to pick your camp, and I think Dubai has picked its camp, and it's been the US camp. Dubai and the UAE generally has picked a camp because it's hard to be a Switzerland. There may be countries that are able to achieve that, but it's a fine line to walk.
Do you see UAE in a broader sort of region would become essentially an AI hub? And what does it take for the city like Dubai to essentially make it happen?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in the emergence of AI hubs in the world, and it's not just San Francisco and Beijing and Shenzhen or Hangzhou. It's many other places. And by the way, you've seen that in the US. New York has become, Austin has become also an interesting place where people do interesting AI. In Canada, you've seen places like Montreal, Toronto. You'll see things like this emerge. What matters? Talent. So you have to attract talent. Talent will move to Dubai because it's a nice place to live in, low taxes, good weather, very welcoming government. So people will move here. But once they move here, what do they do? I think the catalyst has to be they have to be working on sexy stuff, stuff that is intellectually stimulating, that is world changing. I think up until now it's been limited, but I think you're starting to see like real world-class talent moving here. And this world-class talent will drive more world-class talent, and these people will work on groundbreaking things. It's kind of where London was maybe 10 years ago, maybe where Paris was 6 years ago. And you're starting to see things like this. And then there is this notion of, as an AI hub, you need to have in that place talent, you have to have economic activity and adoption, so companies who pull effect from corporates.
Market, basically.
Yeah. You have to have corporates that adopt, right? And then, if you don't, because it's a small place, then you have to go out, like the Israelis have done very, very well. Do not consider your local market as your domestic market. Consider the US as your domestic market. That's what Israeli companies have done very well, right? So I can completely see, companies here being based here, having their workforce partially here, maybe partially in India or places in Africa and elsewhere, but looking at global markets and US market as a domestic market. And there's capital here, and there's a lot of willingness to try, which you want. You want an environment that is encouraging you to try.
You spent a number of years in Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong government announced a massive investment in building data centers to leverage on sort of AI revolution going forward. What's your take on the future of Hong Kong in that sense within this industry, and what the city should do in order to maximize its potential within the next decade of AI development?
So it's great that Hong Kong is investing in a data center infrastructure. It's very important because without compute, you don't have AI. Data centers is also bandwidth, the quality of networks, but that's not enough, right? As I said about Dubai, you have to attract talent. And so I think the other key deliverable here is let's attract talent and foster, encourage people to try. I think the fact that ChatGPT is not available in Hong Kong is a problem. And so the government has to think about ways to organize the ecosystem so that everybody can be comfortable deploying there, right? Including the likes of OpenAI and others. But by the way, this is not just Hong Kong. I mean, the European Union has enacted, in my view, regulation that is counterproductive, right? So make it such that your market is open, and big and small companies can come and compete and build. So I think Hong Kong is, because it's an urban center. It has very strong competencies in things like finance, insurance, corporate services, logistics, transportation, tourism. It can build a vibrant AI ecosystem, but for this, beyond data centers, it needs to attract talent.
What would be your advice to, say, Hong Kong government on how to tackle this problem?
First of all, I would say multiply the size of Hong Kong Science Park by 5, 10, 20x. Make it a lot cheaper for companies to have sizable operations locally. Continue to invest in tertiary education, and I think Hong Kong has great universities. Make it such that talent, not just from Asia, but from the world over, you need to be very open-minded about the talent that comes in, because like Dubai, effectively, Dubai is welcoming folks from everywhere. UAE is welcoming folks from everywhere because it is perceived as a very open place. And I think Hong Kong used to be a very open place. It became less of an open place. I think it has to become again that open place, a very welcoming place that it used to be.
You mentioned that you find this over-regulation of AI industry in Europe is counterproductive. With the recent announcement made a few days ago about deploying 200 billion euros in AI development going forward, how do you think these two things will coexist?
So I think Europe is trying very hard, and France in particular is trying very hard to change the narrative. And I think it's great, okay? But it has to go beyond changing the narrative. It has to go towards simplifying the life of entrepreneurs. I'm a VC, right? It's not easy, to believe it or not, to set up a VC in Europe as compared to in the US. Much easier in the US. Why? Let me give you another example. And I really believe in this. Some people in Brussels believe that it's a good idea to regulate AI holistically. There is something called AI that should be regulated. But we don't regulate HI, human intelligence, holistically, right? We regulate HI in its application, right? So if you're a doctor, you're certified as a doctor. If you're a lawyer, you pass the bar. If you're a driver, you pass a driving license. The way that we're regulated as humans is not holistic. It is specific by jobs, by profession. And it works well. Why would we not apply the same frameworks to AI? What's interesting is that those frameworks broadly exist because we've built them for humans. So we can take the ones we've built for humans and adapt them for AI. So we want an AI lawyer. Well, let's take the bar exam and see whether it's the right exam for AI. And maybe we will make some tweaks. Maybe we'll make it harder, right? Same thing with the driving license, right? Pass a driving license, and it will be a lot more stringent that driving license that you and I, we pass, right? Each time there's a software refresh, we'll have a new driving license test for these cars. That's how we should regulate AI. And if we do it this way, it's very pragmatic, it's specific, and the good news is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel because most of these, not all, but most of these frameworks already exist.
When you're referring to sort of the rules that are designed for humans, based on how our human intelligence work. Do you think there is a potential where, at first, we don't really understand how our brains work to the full extent? When AI could potentially develop the other way of forms of intelligence that we as humans weren't even able to comprehend. Then the question of how we're going to regulate that.
Yeah, it's quasi-philosophical. I mean, first of all, your brain doesn't necessarily work the same as mine. I mean, the human brain is this giant black box, much more black, in fact, than a machine brain. In fact, we can know a lot more about a machine than we can know about human brain, at least now. I think we'll do very well, better than what we've done so far, if we just apply our basic frameworks for human intelligence regulation, and if we take this to machines. And then you're right, there will be, you're probably right, there will be instances where machines develop behaviors that are unforeseen and maybe not understood. As long as we continue to apply these guardrails, and these guardrails cover our life, then we'll be okay. At the end of the day, when a bank or a hedge fund trading desk operates, it has a risk framework. And whether it's a human who trades or an algorithmic trading engine, at some point in time, the risk framework kicks in because the exposure is too great, the trade is too big, the risk is too high. Boom, it kicks in. Regardless of everything else, it kicks in and it just stops. And I think we can have the very same protocols for machines.
So thank you very much, Antoine. It was extremely exciting and insightful conversation. I really hope that we will be continuing this conversation going forward in the near future.
Anthony, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to the next opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.